call this meeting to order. Please stand for the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Caroline, can we have a roll call, please?
Yes, we can. Susan, Mr. Brylick?
Here.
Mrs. Minnie? Here. Mr. Platzer?
Here.
Mr. Apple?
Here.
Mrs. Trumbull here.
Okay, the special meeting was called because of this ordinance, 1921G, ordinance number 0608 that we passed the other night. After the meeting, it was brought to my attention that, we had passed the ordinance. I think it was passed 4-1. But
No, it was 5-0. The 4-1 were on the other two ordinances. I just looked it up.
Oh, okay. So evidently there's some confusion or in the minds of the board members as to exactly what we, what we passed and what we didn't pass. So if I'm going to open the meeting to comment by the board and to discuss this ordinance. So who would ever like to begin?
I think the big thing is that there's just commercial properties that are not covered that I believe need to be covered under this. Probably at least 75% of the businesses in Burtchville Township wouldn't be able to be rebuilt if they were over 60% destroyed. And I think we need to protect that also. I mean, we're trying to protect all the houses with the small lots and
The residents.
yeah, I can start naming off if you want, but I don't think there's any real reason to. It's not like we have a lot of businesses, but
There are that many businesses that have a non-conforming use.
They probably all do.
probably all of them. Other than the
Not use necessarily. It would be a footprint thing more than the use. No, they're probably all conforming to the use now.
Well, yeah, as far as
setbacks and parking and
yeah, it's setbacks and stuff is the big thing. Parking.
Well, I think if we go back to a minute, for a minute, and exactly why was this ordinance in its form before we ever played with it, or changed it to, I think we have to look back and look at the history of why this was done. And if it was done to get rid of the non-conforming lots and to bring everything up to, that from accidental or whatever cause, I don't know, because I wasn't on the board or I wasn't on the planning commission when they brought this in, so, I just like to review, but it would look to me like this ordinance, for some reason, was brought into effect to eliminate some of the non-conforming buildings and stuff that we have in the township.
I think it would be the hopes of the planning commission for everything to be gone, non-conforming, all non-conforming to be
To just go.
gone. That's the perfect real world, but I don't think it can happen here.
Well, just to go back, if you want to go back there, Mike, as I explained before, there was a lot of time spent on this. A lot of discussion over and over and over again, as has the current planning commission. They worked on it for, Loretta said today, 6 months, and 2 votes. The thought at the time, and correct me if I'm wrong, Al, was that we were taking all the parcels in the township and changing them primarily. Either their zoning, they became non-conforming, and the biggest question we had was these people couldn't rebuild because they were all non-conforming, and we had a lot of different non-conforming issues. It could be you're on 1.5 acres and you're supposed to have 2 acres in agricultural residential. It could be you're on a 40-foot lot, and if you went by our new regulations, I don't even know if you could build, And I think we mostly agreed, primarily the majority agreed, that to do this to that many parcels in the township, we were adopting a new ordinance, yes, to kind of improve things for the future, but we also had actually assigned the supervisor at that time, chairman of the planning commission. He wasn't supervisor then, Don? He was chairman of the planning commission.
He was chairman of the planning commission before
He was supervisor.
he was supervisor.
Anyway, he was going to do a list, and that was just an overwhelming task.
He was supervisor at that time.
At that.
Okay, he was
A&B.
supervisor
This-
then, okay,
This
right.
ordinance was adopted in 2006.
That's right, you're right, okay. So he was here at a combined meeting was when this was discussed. And it was just an overwhelming task. So then it was discussed as to how we could complete what it was we intended. And it was agreed that we just take all Class B, which was non-conforming, and I understand, and make everything into Class A so that every single individual parcel property owner did not have to go to the ZBA and have their property changed. And if they didn't, discover that if they had a complete loss, they couldn't rebuild what they had built and also insured for replacement. We didn't want to put that hardship on those people. Then we took a look at the businesses and said, okay, we have a handful of businesses and they seem like we didn't really have an issue. There were two that we identified that we said, well, you know, if they disappeared, that would be okay. But we didn't really want to attack these two small businesses that were off on side streets.
Well,
that was-
wasn't that
That was the intent.
Harris Road, little cottages, wasn't that, Al, one of the things, I know we discussed that a lot, because it wasn't in a, it was in residential, you remember?
I don't know so much as it's residential, it's just, I don't know, what is that up there? That's multiple, isn't it? North Lakeport? Harris Road?
Harris Road? No, it's
We
residential.
changed, it used to be multiple, we changed it, yeah.
Yeah,
that-
you changed it to
So
residential.
that's an issue there, all those little cabins.
We created these issues by adopting our ordinance, so I think the majority, again, I know it was the majority decided, because we did send it to the ZBA. I guess we thought that was what we were advised would take care of it, and I know you didn't feel that that really was adequate to do that. You don't remember that either?
We went to the ZBA.
On Harris Road? or-
No,
For the
No, the
whole
whole
township.
thing.
Okay.
For the whole township.
Sorry, that was for the entire township, I'm sorry.
I was talking about a particular-
And they
No.
approved, basically, they did a blanket approval of changing properties from Class B to Class A.
And I had very little involvement with the whole Class AB process. Don was spearheading that and everything.
But no, just recently, you addressed that when we talked at our meeting and said you didn't think that that was probably adequate.
No, all I said was your new ordinance did away with the AB distinction.
Okay,
This book, you don't find the AB distinction
That's
present
right, that's
anywhere
right.
in that anymore. It was something that was done, and then, I don't know if it was fully appreciated, that that whole set of distinctions was eliminated. So we came back in, and planning was kind of comfortable with where we started. I pointed out to the planning commission that I wasn't very happy just from a wordsmith perspective of whether or not this applied to non-conforming uses of land in addition to non-conforming structures or lots. So the first thing that we did at planning was added in the first three sentences, we added some clarity just to make sure, well, first of all, I made sure that's what planning wanted, and they all voted yes. To soften it, to make it apply to non-conforming uses of land as opposed to just non-conforming buildings or structures. Then we tweaked the percentage rules to make that a little more consistent and clear. And then we added two new provisions at board last time to talk about some non-conforming lots of record. And you have a unique thing in your ordinance where your business and commercial districts don't allow residentials, which is very unique. Most places do have that building block approach that we talked about last time, which if it's allowed in a lower district, you can also do that in a higher district. But your ordinance created a particular hardship on people because they were having trouble getting insurance and mortgages for residential property, because if that residence were destroyed, that property could never be used again, so they were forced to really have commercial mortgages and commercial insurance for residential, and that's a hardship, and I think it would make perfect sense to add that third and fourth softening, and I say fourth because we had the non-conforming lots of record down on the beach where it would be difficult for them to go to the, like, for example, the 40-foot lots have a 4-foot setback on each side, because now they have more than that. I don't recall ever being asked or providing any opinions as to whether or not we should allow all the commercial businesses to be rebuilt as is.
Well,
I think they're general business.
as I've said before, I was very comfortable with the top part of that ordinance, and, you know, and then going down and notwithstanding. But I think we need to be really prudent in weakening this ordinance. I mean, what we're doing is, if we allow that to happen, is we're making this ordinance weaker than it was when they adopted it to begin with. From at least from my standpoint, maybe I'm wrong.
Began
Maybe
with in
somebody.
2006.
Yeah.
That's true.
But that was always the intent, Mike, all along, was that we were going from that step forward, but because of the situation we had in this township with all these small parcels, we didn't want to.
No, I'm just putting this out as a devil's advocate.
Right.
You know, I
right.
mean, what I see is we're just taking this ordinance and we're just tearing it apart. You know.
Well, some of it needs to be.
Well, and that's why we're having a special meeting to
Okay.
decide, you know, what the board's feeling is. It, you know, I was perfectly happy with the upper part and the lower part, and I thought, you know, I had a pretty clear understanding of you know, what it meant. But again, like I said, if we choose to include business, you know,
Well,
industrial.
at the
and,
meeting Monday night, I thought that's, if you recall, I said, does this include business? Well, then everybody said no. Bob, well, not everybody, but Bob Bailey said no. And so I don't feel that businesses should be, if they've been in business and something happened, I feel they should be able to be rebuilt.
I think if you read the ordinance the way it was presented at the meeting on Monday night, it did include the businesses.
Well,
I mean, it
okay,
was
and that's what you
60%. You know, what I'm saying is that when you asked that question, I said, yes, it does include the
Right.
businesses, because it includes, you know, it's a 60% rule, but it did include the businesses and
And it said use.
industrial and use, you know.